When hunting, there are a number of ways to attract animals. The grey squirrel has a fairly distinctive call, which is often missed by those who don't stop and watch them. It has quite a scratchy whine to it. One of the more unique ways of mimicking a grey squirrel is to use 2 coins. The size of the coin doesn't really matter. Here I am using 2 British 10p coins, but any coins that have this textured metal jimping on the edge will work. There are 2 basic methods. The first is tapping one coin against the other. A few fast taps followed by some slower ones. The second and much more accurate method is to grind one edge of a coin against the other coin edge. This replicates the scratching noise to the squirrel's call. To make it even more effective, you can cup one of the coins to make your hand into an echo chamber. This produces a slightly deeper noise, which is much closer to the call of a grey squirrel. This also applies to the tapping of the coins. Cup one coin in one hand and it will make a deeper sound. The more you sit and watch squirrels, the more accustomed you will become to the pattern of their calls, especially their distress call when they notice danger is nearby. Wood pigeon are never too far from water. They drink a lot of water due to their relatively dry diet. They tend to find water at dawn or dusk, just before they go to roost. If a pigeon is flying straight and low, this can be a sign they are heading for water. When they fly from tree to tree slowly, then they have likely come from water. At dusk, pigeons come to roost in the trees. These are all tips worth knowing. From a hunting perspective, it gives you a better picture of where to set up your hide in the right position to intercept the pigeons as they fly to roost. Or, from a survival perspective, it can be an indication that water might be nearby. Here is an example of one of the most simple, basic snares that you can make. The first thing is to find a game trail. A game trail is a well-worn path that animals make as they walk through the woods to their favourite grazing areas. If that path passes through a small gap of 2 trees, then this is an ideal place for a snare. I'm going to make this particular trap out of brass snare wire. The reason for brass is that it is easily malleable and resistant to friction breaking, which means it can slide on itself really easily. First, I make a small loop in the wire and then wrap this loop over the twig. Then, holding the tag end and loose end of the wire, I just twist the stick multiple times. Once I've wrapped it a few times, I just snap the twig either side of the loop and it's ready. Now I can thread the snare wire through the loop and I can check that it can easily cinch down on itself. Next up, I tie the snare to one of the nearby trees, making sure to wrap it on itself multiple times so that it won't slip. Ideally, the snare loop needs to be above the ground slightly, around a height of 4 fingers. To help keep the snare loop in place, I find 2 nearby twigs that have a fork or Y shape to them. Then I just loosen the snare loop to the size that I would like it. This will depend on what the size of the small game is that you are looking to catch. And then use the forked sticks to keep its shape and prop it up. Here's what the final setup looks like. The brass wire is secured to the tree. This leads down to the running snare loop, which is propped up off the ground by the 2 forked sticks. I would now need to lay some sticks and debris in a funnel shape to encourage the animal to head into the snare. As the animal goes through the snare, it will feel the wire and bolt, resulting in the snare snapping shut and trapping the animal. It's important to check snares regularly and also to check your local laws and bylaws, as not all countries allow it and some have strict laws against it. But I feel it is better to have this knowledge and not need to use it than to need to use it in a survival situation and have absolutely no knowledge of how to make it. But what if you catch an animal in a snare, go to check on it, only to find that it's been eaten by another animal? Well, you can adapt this snare by adding in a trigger system and a few more components. To begin with, I need to cut the sapling back to where the snare is attached, leaving a couple of inches of space above it. Then I cut a short 4-inch section from this same stick, as this is going to be the second part of the trigger system. Next, I need to use my knife to cut a notch near the top section of the cut sapling. I just make a number of slice cuts and a stop cut to remove the bark and create the small notch. If I cut the notch too deep into the sapling, I risk the notch itself snapping. Now I marry up the 4-inch support stick to see where I need to cut the second notch. Essentially, this notch needs to be on the opposite side of the previous one, so that it locks in place. Now I check that the notches will catch into each other. They don't need to look pretty and completely fit into each other, otherwise the trigger system won't be as sensitive and the snare arm won't release quick enough to trap the prey. Then I make a final notch on the trigger stick, on the opposite side of the previous notch. This is to secure paracord to. Again, it doesn't need to be too deep. Now I find a nearby sapling which is going to act as my spring pole. If you don't have any saplings nearby, you can just cut one and bury it in the ground near the trap, but it likely won't be as springy. I remove any side branches sticking out, as these could catch on the nearby trees and slow the movement of the spring pole. I cut off the very tip of the branch and make a small notch near the tip. I use this notch to tie a piece of cordage to. I'm using bright orange paracord for this part, just so you guys can see it on the camera. I then tie the other end of the paracord to the notch on the trigger stick. If this is done correctly, the trigger stick should just faintly rest against the vertical stick. This is the part to try and test the system works by knocking it gently with a stick from afar. If it pops off easily and the pole springs back, it's ready to go. If not, then I need to adjust the notches again. Then I just secure the already made snare to the trigger stick and set it up in the same way that I did before, using the vertical forked twigs to help keep the loop supported and open. The snare itself works in the same way. The prey approaches, gets caught up in the snare. This time though, the movement causes the trigger stick to release, which then causes the spring pole to engage, and the prey is caught in the snare and raised up off the ground. The taller the spring pole you use, the higher the prey is caught off the ground, which would hopefully keep it out of reach from other predators which might take it from the snare when you aren't there. Almost every survival kit that you buy will feature this, a survival handsaw, essentially a piece of wire with rough edges and 2 loops on either side for handles. A common mistake to make when using these is to try and cut wood by pulling the 2 handles towards you. This seems like the logical way to do it. The more you can pull towards you, the more power you can generate. But you'll soon realise that this is the wrong way to do it. The angle is far too acute, and very soon the wire saw will pinch and get stuck, leaving you frustrated and wondering why you even bothered. I found the best method is to try to replicate what a conventional saw would do. It is horizontal and taut, so I tend to hold my arms out to my side, keeping the wire saw taut, and then rock my arms back and forth whilst keeping them as straight as I can. This reduces the angle of the wire saw and allows it to cut through the wood much easier. It's not easy, believe me, but for something so small, it's good to know how to use one if you did keep it in your kit. Survival tins. Some feel they are gimmicks. Some people never leave home without them. Each to their own, but I actually think that if you're off on a trip and you plan to leave your campsite for some fishing, foraging, or just general exploring, it's a good idea to put a micro survival tin in your pocket, just in case something went wrong when you are away from your main gear. That way, you have items on you that might be able to help you if a situation turns bad. Even just a simple tin like this, no bigger than the palm of my hand, can contain a number of key items that could be used in a survival situation. This small flat fire steel is an awesome piece of kit. The striker is hidden inside one end of the housing, and it throws decent sparks for such a small fire steel. It also has an emergency whistle built into the other end. A small candle can be great as a flame extender. If your lighter fuel is low, just light the end of the candle and then you have much more time to get your fire lit. This tiny button light packs a punch for its size. Imagine being away from camp at night, you fall and break your leg, and you have no head torch and your phone is out of battery. You would be so grateful for a small light of any sort. This button light has a switch which you can flick and turns it on permanently, or you can just press the button which turns the light on and off each time. That way you can do SOS signals to signal for rescue. These button compasses come with mixed reviews. The cheap ones can stick and stop moving, but the better ones move freely with no restrictions. Double check the compass points north by checking it next to a decent quality one before you head out on your trip. A condom can store a significant amount of water. If you needed a container to store and carry water, fill the condom up, put it in a sock to protect it from tearing, and you can collect water inside it and then put a purification tablet into it to make the water safe to drink. A small sewing kit, more for repairs of clothing or tarp and tent materials, but in an emergency it could be used to close up an open wound. This small Ziploc bag contains water purification tablets, some alcohol wipes, plasters, and basic first aid items that you would probably use quite often, especially the plasters. A small hank of 550 paracord. The inner strands could be used for making emergency fishing line, but it could also double up for a bow drill string. Finally, this tiny tin contains a fishing kit. It has a fishing line, a few hooks, some weights, swivels, soft plastic worms and grubs, safety pins, and a Siloom light stick. That's quite a lot of really useful items that fit inside this tiny tin. It takes up barely any space or weight in my backpack, and I barely feel it when it's in the cargo pocket of my trousers. One of the ways you can store a backup supply of paracord is to weave it onto your backpack. This can be done either on the carrying D-loop, or alternatively, you can store quite a decent amount on the shoulder straps. You can secure it to the shoulder strap by doing what's called a cobra weave. Grab a few meters of paracord and loop it underneath the shoulder strap. Then take the right hand cord and wrap it over the left hand cord, and then feed it back under the right hand side of the shoulder strap. This will form a small loop. Adjust this loop so that it sits snug against the shoulder strap and at the height that you want it. Then grab the left hand cord, wrap it over the front of the shoulder strap, and take the right hand cord and wrap it over the left cord and back underneath the shoulder strap to the other side. This forms another loop on the right hand side. Now just repeat the process on the other side again. Each time, keep forming a loop on the opposite side and feeding the cordage over, back under, and through to the other side. That way, each loop should be symmetrical. You can pull the cordage slightly more tight each time, but don't pull it too tight, otherwise the shoulder strap will be uncomfortable. Eventually, you will get to the end of the cord. Just tie it off with an overhand knot so that it doesn't slip back through and unravel itself. Make sure to burn the ends of the cord, and then use the side of the lighter to flatten off the paracord, as this will prevent it from loosening. Then, you can grab another few meters of paracord and do the exact same thing to the other shoulder strap. I decided to cobra weave this paracord on the highest point of my shoulder straps so that they actually sit in the gap between the top of my neck and the backpack itself. That way, when the pack is heavy, the paracord is not putting any pressure points on my shoulders or neck. Now I have a good few meters of paracord which I can use in an emergency. They could even be joined together to make one long piece of cordage for tying out a ridge line for a tarp, or the inner strands could be tied together to make a fishing line. Either way, it's a unique way of storing lots of paracord on the outside of your kit. A slightly different but still useful fire lighting method is lighting a bundle of twigs directly. This involves skipping out the tinder part, so you spend less time collecting resources. Just gather up a load of dead, dry twigs about pencil thickness. Have your other sticks and firewood ready to go. Then, instead of lighting your tinder and waiting for that to catch the twig bundle into the flame, you can just hold the twig bundle in one hand and hold a match underneath it. By the time the match burns out, the twig bundle should have caught fire. If not, you can use your lighter, although this might use up more fuel in your lighter. One alternative that I have been enjoying lately is this stealth fire starter. It's a cracking piece of kit. It has a piece of waxed jute twine that is attached to it. You just throw some sparks onto the end of the jute twine and then it will burn really slowly, similar to a candle. Slowly enough to just hold under this twig bundle and ignite it. Then I just pull the jute twine back through the tube on the fire steel and it extinguishes it, ready to be used again the next time I light a fire. I'll put a link to this in the description box below. These compact water bags by Whirlpack are a really useful item to have in your kit. They come in various sizes and have a rigid wire closure at the top so that you can seal it shut. This particular bag is 1 litre, which means I can just fill it with lake or river water and then add a water purification tablet, let it dissolve, and after 30 minutes the water will have been purified and will be ready to drink. It's not something I would do on every trip, but the fact it rolls down so small, is exactly 1 litre and has the wire closure makes it a really efficient water purification container, without me having to use my regular drinking bottle, which could get contaminated. Arguably, the fastest natural shelter you can make is a lean-to. This is a shelter that has 1 ridgepole with some vertical sticks facing up against it, and then some debris thrown on top. An A-frame shelter offers more protection from the elements, especially the wind, but it takes twice as long to build, as you need double the materials to make the other side of the A-frame. Fallen trees offer a great place to build a shelter, providing they are stable and safe. Your ridgepole is already provided for you, so just lay some sticks against it, then weave in some thinner sticks to catch the debris and stop it from falling, and then just add a thick layer of leaves for cover. It won't be 100% waterproof, but it's quick, simple and effective. Many thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to subscribe. And if you want to watch more like it, then check out my Wilderness, Bushcraft and Survival Skills playlist in the description box below. It has over 35 videos just like this, with plenty of skills and tips. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.